Today we're going to talk about Aspas because there has been a big discussion about Aspas. In fact, in our most recent podcast on the VODfathers, we talked about Aspas as well in depth. Go and check that one out. But I'm going to talk about Aspas today because Aspas in his last two games against NRG, they lost 2-1 MIBR, but Aspas broke the best of 3 kill record and went plus 38 and plus 8 in first kills to first deaths. He then, against DRX, almost broke his own record in the very next game and only got 4 kills off it and went plus 14 in first kills to first deaths. But a lot of people, you know, it's Aspas, so of course there's a bit of reaction of saying that, oh, his stats and his numbers are only so good because he's a bit of a beta. He's not the GOAT, he's just a beta. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at these two games, right? We're going to take a look at Sunset and Ascent, because if you take a look at these two maps, for instance, let's take Sunset, you see on their attack side here, right, your Neon Duelist on attack side only was involved in 2 first engagements. Right, 2 first kills to 0 first deaths for Aspas, and there are multiple other players on his team who had more, right? And some of you might think, see, proof, beta. If we take a look at Ascent as well, similar sort of situation, he only takes 4 first duels, and Artzin takes 5 and loses all 5, so we'll take a look at those 5 as well for him. Now, on the third map of Bind, he did end up taking the most of his team, so we won't focus on that map as much. But let's take a look at the first 2 maps. Let's start with Sunset here, where he did only take 2 first engagements. Now, the first thing that I do want to say is, you might look at this and be like, your Neon only took 2 first engagements. That's obviously a worrying sign. You know, you want your Neon just diving in head first. Well, sometimes when your Neon dives in head first, you get what happened to DRX, where your Neon goes 0-7 and doesn't get a single kill all half and ends up with a 0.01 rating and only 27 ACS. So sometimes that isn't necessarily the best solution either. But let's kick this off then, and let's start with the pistol round. And in this round, you're going to see one of the main problems with just looking at the scoreboard and seeing who's got the first kills and first deaths.
Maybe the best game we've ever seen in VCT. Definitely the best game we've seen in Champions. Just still couldn't quite get it over the line.
Quick jiggle there, going on punish from flashback, sends out the relay bolt, try to delay. Does get pinged though. They now frantically try to spray him out of this position. He is going to get stunned up, but they're still not scaling because they're not sure what else is behind this smoke. Mako now looking to join in the frenzy. Aim is going to be broken. Mako going to be good for 1.
Okay, this first round is very interesting because you could make the argument either side for this, right? In terms of what you think of Aspas in this round. Because on the one hand, he doesn't actually end up in the first engagement, even though he is right there, right? Which shows some of the problems with the first engagement. But on the other hand, you could very much well say, if we take a look at the map here, okay, yeah, they get hit by the paranoia at first, like, that's fine, whatever. We then get the reveal on flashback, right? So he gets revealed, and at this point, you're like, MIBR, for whatever reason, you know, taking an incredibly long time to go and just kill this guy, right? Then Aspas goes for this stun, and he gets stunned. And for some reason, again, you know, they still don't. And this is where I think, you know, you could reasonably say that another duelist here is just, you know, running in after that stun and killing this guy, right? And Aspas isn't. Therefore, that's a problem, right? But we also, on the other hand, get what is a problem in a lot of these other rounds, which is Aspas is here, right? He is involved in this first engagement. I mean, look at him right here. He is clearly involved in this first engagement. It just so happens that Genom kills Flashback first before Mako kills Aspas. Right, so he technically isn't the first death here. But he is obviously involved in the first engagement. And this is the first thing about, you know, just staring at the scoreboard is sometimes you get these team fights and it's a little bit random as to who actually dies first, right? And who gets the number on the scoreboard. And in this case, you know, he is separated from the team here, you know, making Mako, you know, having to turn this way, which then makes it easier for these guys to come and get the kill. So in one sense, he did do his job, but in another sense in this round, you do see that he played it perhaps more passively than most other duelists would. Okay, so that's one reason why Aspas might not be involved as many first engagements, and that does happen throughout some of these rounds on Sunset as well, where there are other team fights that he just doesn't happen to be the first guy to get the first kill or first death in. But there's also another thing that happened quite often here, particularly on Sunset, which is defensive aggression.
Stinger, not a different variety. Trying to get aggressive with that judge, but obviously MIBR knows it's there. Knows it's a consideration in this round.
Oh, he's going to go sliding forward. He's going to be rewarded with 1. Artzin going to be taking...
Yeah, obviously in these defensive aggression rounds, like we see here, right, where Aspas is actually, you know, playing in mid with Verno here instead, obviously if the defenders are aggressive somewhere in the map and someone gets caught out by it, or is it, then it has to be involved in a first engagement, you know, like here where the first kill goes to Mako, you know, obviously that's not your duelist baiting, that's just the defenders being aggressive. And this is the thing that you need to understand about, you know, this Sunset map in particular, and even the whole game somewhat, is that DRX do like to be aggressive on the defense side. There's like 4 or 5 different rounds where DRX, you know, end up doing something very, very aggressive early on in the round. And obviously who is involved in that, again, is kind of somewhat random. However, there is one instance of defensive aggression from DRX in this game that I do think is quite interesting to this discussion.
Aspas going in for a check, but yeah, it's going to be Artzin now taking down the Hunter Spirit, coming across as well here from Bane, looking for a punish, but looking everyone able to get out wide away from him for the overdrive.
Okay, so in this one, again, I think you get another glimpse of Aspas doing something that probably other duelists wouldn't, right? So if we take a look at what goes on here, it's him and Artzin out here towards A. He goes jumping up. Now this, again, I think is part of why other duelists wouldn't necessarily be able to do this, is because Aspas's recognition, I think, that this is an aggro play, and perhaps, hey, they've got Silver ult, and Waylay ult, and Neon ult. I think he's more ready for it than most of the players would be in terms of his speed of recognition, right? And especially when you're playing on Neon, in terms of like, you know, if you're a half a second later than Aspas is to this, right? Like, if he's here, right, and he instantly starts sending back, but if you take one more step forward, well, there's no way you can then get out from this. Right, so at that point you are committed. So one part of this I do think is that Aspas is just better at recognizing certain things than other players are, and therefore, you know, this is an option to him, whereas to other players it might not be. However, again, most duelist players, I feel, do not just skip and hop away from this, you know, whilst a teammate is here. Right, most duelist players perhaps do, you know, slide forward even, you know, and try and fight this, or try and fight Mako, right, or whatever it may be. But if you take a look at it, you know, this is not something that perhaps you're super used to seeing, and this, you know, might lead you to somewhat believing, you know, hey, look, he's a beta. There is another argument to be had here that Aspas is in the right, you know, that maybe he is recognizing the problem and getting back to a safe space, and Artzin needs to maybe be quicker or whatever in terms of recognizing that and trying it. But obviously they're on a different page. That's kind of the main problem here, is that they do different things, right? But in a sense, you know, Aspas ends up back here fighting with the team to a point where he kills Flashback, and they make it a 3v3 where it's actually winnable still. Okay, now let's finally take a look at round number 12 here, and this is another one that I think the Aspas haters would say, you know, again, look at him baiting, you know, not playing like normal duelists, you know, I mean, it's just going to be an A hit from MIBR, but again, it is a bit slower. It's done a little bit different to how maybe most teams would do it. They wait for Aspas to actually pick up his ult there. They're then going to swap weapons with Artzin. So at the moment he has a rifle, they swap it around because now he's got his ult. And again, like, it's maybe not done in the style of a lot of other teams where, you know, at this point in the round, I mean, look, DRX literally rotate everyone here. So you might be like MIBR here, and you might say to Aspas, hey, look, you're too slow, right? You're too slow, you're too patient, you're not going in fast enough, because look, DRX have rotated everyone across the map, right? You put yourself in a bad spot. But then DRX decide they're going to go for this aggro re-clear, right? And MIBR do decide to just pause. And this is the thing, if you pause long enough, eventually, I mean, DRX do this pretty fast, to be fair, but, you know, eventually something's going to happen. They still got loads of time. So Artzin, again, is going to be involved in this first engagement. He gets the first kill, gets traded, but then Aspas is going to come back. He pops his ult, and then he goes, right? And this is the thing. At this point, he recognizes a good time to entry. Okay, he dies there to Mako, but, you know, at this point, as soon as, like, he recognizes the moment, he goes for it. And he does go in. And he does end up dying, but they get the trade there, and they end up winning the round, right? So again, this is maybe another case of, like, does it look maybe like what other teams would do? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But in this instance, was it a bad choice? You know, they ended up winning the round. He got a trade. He, you know, did a lot of damage that led to another kill for them as well. Like, you know, was it that bad? I would say no. So now let's come to Ascent, and let's start with round number 15. And this first kill, I think if you're just watching it on the radar, you might be like, oh, Aspas, look at him, he's a beta.
They get that information just in time before they commit. Flashback. Aggro. Ooh.
Quick refract away. Top flash going to be sent, but flashback not looking to try to push this smoke. Verno, however, does.
So there you go. Verno's going in the smoke, but Aspas isn't. He's just left him to die. What are they doing? Well, if you actually take a look at what happens here and you slow it down and understand what's going on, you'll see that what actually happens here is they get flashed. They get hit by this flash. There is then also a dart coming out. So it's good play from DRX. There's a dart here. So what happens? These two are flashed. Aspas hides behind the box to hide from the dart because obviously they don't want to get revealed and die to spam here. Verno has no option, right? So he has to go inside the smoke to avoid the dart. That's all that's happening here is Aspas has managed to find a different part of cover and Verno is having to find one in the smoke. Now obviously that's just well played by DRX, right? It's a nice little util combo from DRX that forced that situation somewhat and they ended up dying. But then after the suppression comes in, Aspas still does a good job here. If he ends up actually finding this kill after the fact, right? In a straight 1v1. He manages to just get the kill back, ends up in a 4v4, and we're back in the round. So again, when you break things down and actually, watch bit by bit what's causing these decisions, you start to see, like, it's not as bad as you think. But on this map of Ascent, Artzin had 5 first deaths. So how is Artzin dying so much first and it's not Aspas? He must be baiting Artzin. There's something going wrong there between the two of them. Well, let's take a look at these rounds. It starts with round number 16.
Putting the bread on the butter.
On in and flashback actually.
So is that baiting? No. Is it whiff pass? Maybe, right? Should he get this kill? Maybe, but between the two of them, they should probably do better than they do. But is he baiting Artzin there? No. Okay, the next Artzin first death, they're actually on an eco round here, and Aspas is one off its knives, and they're coming towards B main, and the goal is to come and get Aspas this ult orb here, right? And you've got Bane sitting here. Now, Artzin is going to swing in first. Okay, they're a little ahead of the paranoia. Aspas actually dies as well. He's shoulder to shoulder with him. Again, no problem. In round number 19, another Artzin first death, we return to our friend defensive aggression.
Gunman.
It's a tiles hit, like a delayed one? Oh my
Didn't like it, but able to find one.
So this is actually quite a cool round, to be fair, because what happens in this one is MIBR are actually ready for the defensive aggression, but they're expecting DRX to do it in kind of, a big kind of heavy way, right? Especially because they've got this Silver ult and this Waylay ult. They're expecting it to come in, some big tiles crunch, heavy pushing out here. But DRX actually do it by just walking out. So they kind of get MIBR here, right? And they kill Artzin. It's quite a cool round. But again, Aspas manages to trade the kill there with the op and again puts them in a winnable spot. Okay, let's finally get to the good stuff, round number 20. And in this one, MIBR are going to do a B split here. And, well, just take a look at what happens because Artzin does end up looking kind of stupid.
Player pull back into the back of sight here for the side of DRX. Still guard and sends out from Ring, trying to delay, trying to take these weapons away, but Aspas still does have that op in hand. Artzin gonna be struck down, but Burnout gets one. Flashback.
So in this one, the haters will be saying, look at him. Look at him just sitting there with his op, never ever trying to help Artzin out here. Artzin has just ended up running on the site on his own. There is, of course, some mitigating circumstances because, yeah, when you look at this map here, and you've just got one guy running in here on his own. We've got a Vice looking this way. Our Sova is actually ulting the site here. Our Omen is lurking down here. And you've got just Aspas looking with an op. Yeah, it doesn't look great for Artzin here just running in. Artzin has just KO ulted, right? So he's KO ulting. So he's thinking if he goes down, and often when your KO is ulting, you do kind of want them to go in first. Because if they go down, it's fine, right? So he's carried on going after his KO ult has just gone. You can see the suppressor in here is on Bane. So he's just had the last pulse a couple seconds ago. And then he ends up dying, right? And it's not great. But guess what? We still end up in a good spot. Right? We still end up in a 3v2 here after all is said and done with the trades on the site of people trying to flood back in. We did a good job at stopping them getting back in. And Aspas did find a kill as well. And also he does have an op. So yeah, this is another situation where do most duelists play it like that? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But it did still kind of work. And then finally we come to round number 21, which is, again, another interesting example.
That 0 point got ready to come through. On the wall. Aspas keeping forward, ready to hit the switch. Door going to be shut. Double tuck in towards boats here from the DRX players. The need to be heroes to try to hold this line. Mako still looking for a late linker. Freeing's gonna be good for 2 though.
So again, this is another example where you might look at Aspas and be like, you know, like at a certain point, so he's gonna come in here. He's very passive around this. They're waiting for the wall to go down, to be fair, so these guys can actually get in the round. And, you know, he is quite slow here in terms of, you know, scaling up with Artzin. Now, he is, you know, looking generally in the right direction. He's in, you know, generally the right spot, but, you know, you could argue that he should be the first one going for that kill. I will also say to Artzin, he has a flash here that he does not use, which I also think is kind of criminal. Right, like you got to use this, whether it's for setting up yourself or for Aspas, who, you know, doesn't matter if he's bait pass or not here. You got to use this flash at some point. And I do think, you know, this wall has gone up here. We could wait, possibly. He definitely should use the flash, no matter like whether they wait or whether they don't. Right, the flash should be coming in either way. Obviously, it doesn't go great for them. They end up losing this round. So, what are my overall thoughts on this Aspas debate? Well, my overall thoughts, and I said this on the podcast as well, is Aspas is like Messi. Okay? You don't ask Messi when you don't have the ball to go running around sprinting trying to get the ball back. That's not how Messi plays. Messi is going to walk around when you don't have the ball. He's not going to help you when you don't have the ball. But he's going to score 3 goals and he's going to win you the game. That's Aspas in Valorant terms. Okay? Yeah, he isn't going to play like certain duelists, right? Other duelists, when they get, you know, when they dash in here initially, you know, they're going as fast as they can into stairs and they are running in, right? So that they can go off this dart, they're getting their KO to flash with them, and they're just sprinting in here. Aspas isn't doing that. That's not how Aspas plays. At the same time, that's fine because he's breaking kill records. I think that Aspas's big problem was that he didn't learn Yoru this year. That, I think, is the Aspas problem, because one, I think it would actually suit his playstyle quite well to be a bit of a secondary duelist who potentially can get out of bad situations by playing Yoru, and obviously Yoru is just kind of insanely good. So that's my take. I know that everyone will have their take. I personally am a belief that Aspas is the best player in the world. He is the GOAT so far of this game, in my opinion. If his playstyle on duelist isn't for you, that is also a perfectly fair argument to make, I think.